Stop now, because every step you take without awareness is a chain tightening around your neck. You think you are choosing freely, but in truth, the choice has already been planted in you by others. Society whispers that a man without a wife is incomplete, that a man without a ring on his finger is irresponsible, that happiness lies in the ceremony and in the contract. Yet what if the very act they tell you will set you free is the one that enslaves you the most? Imagine waking up one day and realizing that you are not living your life, but the life others demanded from you. This is the fatal mistake, surrendering your freedom in the name of an illusion. And today I will show you why this mistake has destroyed countless men and why you cannot afford to repeat it. Marcus Aurelius once confessed in his meditations that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. If you allow the constant repetition of cultural dogma to color your mind, soon you no longer know whether your desires are yours or merely echoes of the crowd. The mistake of marriage, as society preaches it, is not simply about commitment, but about giving away your sovereignty. You begin to believe that respect comes from fulfilling expectations rather than from commanding yourself. Seneca in his letters warned that it is not the man who has too little who is poor, but the man who always craves more. How many marriages are born not of love, but of craving approval, craving stability, craving to prove worth? And yet that hunger leaves you poorer than ever, because now your peace depends on another person's moods, on a system of obligations, on the judgment of families and neighbors. You think you gain security, but in truth you gamble away your inner fortress. Epictetus reminded his students that no man is free who is not master of himself. When you let others decide the measure of your happiness, you are no longer master. You are a tenant, paying rent to an idea that never truly belonged to you. And so the trap is set. The ring that glitters on your hand is not a symbol of eternal love, but of eternal surrender. Stop now. Look closely, because the step they call maturity may well be the step into your own invisible prison. You know this pressure, don't you? The quiet questions at family dinners, the sideways looks from friends already married, the endless comments that suggest your life is incomplete until you give in. It is not an abstract theory. It is the air you breathe. Society has rehearsed its script for centuries, and it delivers the same lines to every man. You are not whole until you choose like everyone else. The problem is not that marriage exists, but that the decision is rarely your own. It is borrowed, imposed, camouflaged as virtue, when in truth it is fear dressed in ceremony. Fear of being alone, fear of judgment, fear of being seen as different. But philosophy is not ancient dust locked in books. It is a mirror for today. As Musonius Rufus insisted, philosophy is not words but medicine for the soul, practical guidance for how to live. And if we take his counsel seriously, then you must ask, what is the medicine for the sickness of living someone else's life? The cure is not more conformity, but courage. The courage to question, the courage to stand apart, the courage to remember that freedom is worth more than applause. Before we go further, I want you to stay with me until the end, because what I will show you in the next moments may not only explain your hidden unease, but could change the course of your choices forever. So if this resonates with you, if you already feel the weight of expectation pressing on your chest, pause for a moment, breathe deeply, and commit to listening. And while you do, take a second to share this message, to let others know they are not alone, and to stand with us as seekers of truth. Enough of circling around the edges. Let's speak plainly. The fatal mistake we are exposing here is not hidden in mystery. It stares every man in the face, yet most refuse to see it. They call it love, they call it duty, they call it stability. But when you strip away the words, what remains is the quiet surrender of your will. Epictetus would remind us that if you want to be free, then wish for nothing outside of your control. And yet how many men tie their happiness to the unpredictable tides of another's emotions, to a system that demands sacrifice without return? This is not freedom, this is dependence. And if we are honest, dependence is the seed of slavery. So let's go straight into the heart of it, step by step, unveiling the layers of illusion until you see what is truly at stake. You might think the first step into marriage is harmless, almost natural, the way the seasons change, or the sun rises each morning. Yet what appears natural is often cultural training so deeply rooted that it feels like instinct. A man grows up hearing fairy tales where fulfillment comes not from his own journey, but from the union promised at the end. He is told by parents that to be responsible is to settle, by teachers that maturity means forming a family, by neighbors that respect only comes when he walks the same narrow path as all others. And because repetition is the most powerful teacher, eventually he stops questioning. But what Seneca warned centuries ago still rings true. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. The suffering here is not from being single, but from the imagined shame of being different. The first chain that wraps itself around you is invisible. It is made of expectation. You fear being the man who disappoints his family, who arrives alone at reunions, who breaks the silent code of tradition. But when you fear these shadows, you begin to live not for yourself, but for the applause of others. Picture yourself at a wedding celebration, everyone dressed in bright colors, music swelling, glasses raised. The crowd cheers as the couple promises forever, but in the corner of your mind you wonder whether this is joy or performance. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them knows anything about the subject. What if the applause of that crowd has no weight because none of them truly knows the cost of the vows? You watch the groom smile, but is it a smile of freedom or of resignation? This is how pressure disguises itself as celebration. You are told it is happiness, but happiness cannot be dictated by the majority. It is either yours or it is nothing. As you move deeper, the illusion changes shape. Once the ring is on, once the contract is signed, the external pressure transforms into internal conflict. Now you are not only judged by society, but by the person beside you. And here lies the second chain, the erosion of peace. Epictetus insisted that no man is disturbed by things themselves, but by the opinions he takes of them. Yet in marriage shaped by expectation, the opinions of your partner become storms you cannot escape. One word of anger, one sigh of disappointment, one silent glance across the dinner table becomes a tempest in your mind. You no longer measure your day by your own compass, but by how calm or turbulent the household feels. You surrender the right to define your own peace, and peace, once surrendered, rarely returns without a fight. Imagine waking before dawn, your chest heavy not from physical labor, but from the weight of constant negotiation. Should you speak or stay silent? Should you pursue that opportunity or sacrifice it for harmony? Should you express your desires or bury them for fear of conflict? Every choice feels like a battlefield. Seneca cautioned that life is long if you know how to use it, but how much of it do men waste in endless debates over trivialities, arguments over schedules, negotiations over freedoms they once had naturally? The hours slip away, not in building virtue, not in cultivating strength, but in maintaining a fragile peace that is never secure. This is not partnership, it is servitude, masked as stability. And as time passes, the third chain tightens: financial, emotional, and spiritual dependency. Musonius Rufus, who preached simplicity as the path to virtue, would shake his head at the modern spectacle of marriages chained to debts, to possessions, to appearances. What begins as love becomes a ledger of expenses, obligations, and compromises. Your choice is narrow because every decision is now two signatures instead of one. Freedom to act is diluted, freedom to think is questioned, freedom to grow is stunted. You cannot live simply because your life is now tied to another's complexity. And when simplicity dies, clarity dies with it. The fourth chain is perhaps the cruelest, the illusion of virtue. You are praised as responsible, as mature, as settled. The community nods in approval, and for a moment you believe you are respected. But Epictetus warned that if you seek approval outside yourself, you have already sold your soul. The respect you receive is conditional, granted only so long as you conform. The moment you deviate, the moment you express discontent, the same society that applauded you will condemn you as reckless, selfish, even immoral. So what did their respect ever mean? It was not respect for you, but for your obedience. You traded the chance to be truly known for the comfort of being quietly tolerated. Consider the metaphor of a ship. Alone, you steer by the stars, free to adjust course when storms arise. But once chained, your rudder is locked, your sails controlled by hands that may not share your vision. You are still on the sea, but the sea no longer belongs to you. Marcus Aurelius urged us to be like a rock against which the waves continually crash, yet remain unmoved. But how can you stand unmoved when you have allowed the waves themselves to command your direction? This is the fatal mistake, confusing stability with surrender. As the chains multiply, so does the cost. First, you lose spontaneity, the ability to act on impulse guided by reason. Then you lose solitude, the sacred space where thoughts sharpen and strength is built. Seneca observed that true happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence on the future. But marriage, as society enforces it, feeds constant anxiety. Will this last? Will this be enough? Will I fail? You begin to live not in the moment, but in perpetual anticipation of judgment, disappointment, collapse. And thus the present is lost, the only thing that ever truly belonged to you. By the time you see the full picture, the fifth chain has already closed, the acceptance of slavery as normal. You hear others complain, joke, or sigh about their marriages, yet all pretend it is inevitable, that suffering is the cost of belonging. Epictetus would call this madness, because freedom is not given, it is chosen. If you choose to stay bound, then the responsibility is yours. But here lies the hardest truth. Most men prefer the comfort of shared misery to the courage of solitary freedom. And so they wear their chains proudly, as if rusted iron could ever be a crown. At the heart of all this, it is not only about marriage or solitude, it is about the question that every man must answer when the noise fades. Who are you when you are alone? And who are you when the crowd demands you to be someone else? The choice is not between ring or no ring, ceremony or no ceremony, but between living as the author of your own story or as a character written by others. Think of the moments when you have felt most alive, not because someone approved of you, but because you acted in alignment with your own soul. That clarity is rare, but it is also sacred, and it is yours to protect. Seneca once reminded Lucilius that the greatest loss of life is that which slips away while we are living in the service of others' expectations. And here lies the human truth. Every man wants love, connection, companionship, but none of these can be real if they are born of fear. If you cannot stand alone with dignity, you will never stand with another in freedom. This is the unspoken secret, that the measure of your relationships will always be the measure of the respect you first hold for yourself. Very few will ever see this truth. Most will continue to march in line, clapping at ceremonies, repeating the same words, convinced that they are choosing freely when in fact they are following the same script as everyone else. And that is why what you are hearing now is rare. You are not like the crowd that avoids uncomfortable questions. You are one of the few willing to look behind the curtain and confront what most fear to admit. Epictetus once said that freedom is the only worthy goal in life, and everything else is just a matter of preference. To understand that now puts you among a minority, a brotherhood of men who refuse to be defined by chains disguised as virtue. Consider what this means. While others surrender to appearances, you are learning to see clearly. While they trade their sovereignty for acceptance, you are reclaiming yours. You are not being invited into bitterness or rejection, but into a kind of strength most never taste. The world will not applaud you for this awareness, but that is precisely what makes it valuable. You stand apart, and standing apart has always been the mark of those who shape their own destiny. But this is where the weight becomes heavier, because awareness alone is not enough. Once you see the trap, you cannot unsee it, and every step forward becomes more urgent. The pressure around you will not fade. In fact, it will grow stronger as you resist. Friends will joke that you are afraid of commitment. Family will accuse you of selfishness. Society will call you incomplete. And yet, what is more selfish than demanding that a man betray himself to satisfy the crowd? Seneca warned that he who does not know what harbor he is heading for will never find a favorable wind. If you do not know your own direction, The world will decide it for you and you will call it fate. The tension builds because you realize this is not just about a wedding or a ring. It is about the loss of your compass, the erosion of your will, the quiet theft of your very identity. And the next step in this path is the one that leaves most men in shock, because it reveals that the true prison is not built by others, but by the man who refuses to claim his own power. Here is the truth you were not meant to hear. The prison is not the marriage itself. The prison is the belief that you need it to prove your worth. From the moment you accept that illusion, you sell your freedom not to a woman, not to a law, but to the idea that your life is incomplete unless it matches the picture painted by society. The ring on your finger is not heavy because of gold or silver, but because it is forged from expectations that were never yours. Epictetus told his students that no man is free who is not master of himself. And when you let the judgment of others decide whether you are respectable, you are no longer master, you are servant. Imagine walking into a cell with the door wide open. No guard pushes you inside, no chain drags you. You step in willingly, convinced that it is safety, and then you close the door yourself. This is what countless men do when they confuse conformity with stability. They mistake surrender for maturity, obedience for honor, silence for peace. And when the years pass, they cannot tell when exactly the bars appeared, only that their spirit no longer remembers how to stretch beyond them. Seneca warned that we are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality. But here the imagination works against you. You fear loneliness so intensely that you run straight into dependence, not realizing that dependence is the true loneliness. To lose yourself in another, to sacrifice your path for the illusion of acceptance, is to wake up one day and find you no longer recognize the man in the mirror. Marcus Aurelius reflected that it is not death a man should fear, but never beginning to live. How many men die long before their bodies fail, suffocated by lives they never chose? They walk, they speak, they smile for photographs, but inside they are shadows of themselves, ghosts carrying out routines in a world that calls them successful. And yet success without freedom is nothing but polished slavery. The fatal mistake then is not marriage itself, but believing that respect, peace, or value can be given to you from the outside. Epictetus made it plain: seek not for events to happen as you wish, but wish them to happen as they do, and you will go on well. If your happiness depends on another, on approval, on ceremony, you will never go on well. Freedom is not found in the applause of the crowd or the blessing of tradition. Freedom is the ability to stand alone with dignity, and only then to join with another without chains. Until you claim that truth, every choice is just another name for captivity. So here we are, standing at the edge of the truth that many never dare to face. The chains are not forged by others, but accepted by the man who refuses to claim his own sovereignty. Respect is not given by rings or contracts, it is born from the discipline to master yourself. Peace is not found in the fragile silence of compromise, but in the unshakable stillness of a soul that refuses to bend under false expectations. As Seneca reminded us, life is long if you know how to use it, but tragically short for those who spend it serving illusions. You must decide if your years will be spent in quiet surrender or in conscious command of your own fate. This is not about rejecting love or companionship. It is about demanding that these things grow from freedom rather than fear. And you, listening now, are among the few willing to see the cost clearly. That awareness is rare, and it is powerful. Now I want to ask you, which part of this truth struck you the hardest? Was it the weight of expectation, the erosion of peace, or the moment you saw the invisible prison for what it truly is? Share it with me. Write it below, because your voice may awaken another man who still sleeps. Together we can create a space where truth is valued over tradition, where freedom is respected above appearances. And that begins with you. If this message has struck something deep within you, do not let it fade as another passing thought. Act now. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, because silence keeps men enslaved, and truth is what sets them free. Subscribe and stay with me, because this is only the beginning. In the next video, I will reveal the most dangerous lie society still tells men about their worth, a lie that silently dictates choices every day. You do not want to miss it. Every man who wakes up, every man who reclaims his freedom, becomes a light for others still trapped in shadows. Let this be the moment you choose clarity over conformity, sovereignty over submission, life over mere existence. The chains break one decision at a time, and the first decision is to never walk blind again.